Hello, I am Peter Okwacha. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. On World Mental Health Day, we'll be looking at the rates and causes of suicide across Africa and what can be done to prevent it. International donors pledge $14 billion to tackle HIV/AIDS, malaria and TB. But will they deliver? I'll wage battle and win. Tunisian presidential hopeful Nabil Karoui prepares for Sunday's runoff, a day after being released from prison. Also on the program, the past becomes the future. Pomp and ceremony as Ethiopia's Unity Park in the grounds of the Grand Palace reopens to the public. And in sports, Ugandan FA boss Moses Magogo is suspended over the resale of World Cup tickets. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Today marks World Mental Health Day, which will be a big theme on the program today. This year, it's focusing on suicide and suicide prevention. Latest figures from the World Health Organization on the number of people taking their own lives are quite shocking. 4 African countries figure among the 10 nations globally with the highest suicide rates: Lesotho, Côte d'Ivoire, Equatorial Guinea, and Uganda. In Africa, Côte d'Ivoire has the highest rate, followed by Equatorial Guinea and Zimbabwe. In these countries, male suicides are more common than female. There's only one country where the rate of female suicides is higher than male, and that's Lesotho. Well, joining me now is Dr. Florence Baingana. She's a consultant with the WHO in Congo-Brazzaville and specializes in mental health. Dr. Baingana, are suicide rates rising, or is it just better reporting of the cases?
It could be both. It could be that actual suicide rates are rising because we have a whole bunch of issues in our continent. HIV/AIDS, we have poverty, we have conflicts and wars, and so all these things together, compounded, cause a lot of distress. We also have a lot of young people who may be facing exams, and that's very competitive. Drug use and abuse, so some of the mental conditions as well. So there are many things that may cause suicide rates to go up.
Indeed. And do you think enough is being done on the continent to tackle mental health generally?
I cannot say we have done enough. We are trying. The continent is trying to address mental health. It's not only in Africa that we have a problem. We have a challenge in that mental health in the past had not been prioritized. But right now, we are lucky in that it was included in the SDGs, and it has also been prioritized by WHO and the UN, the global health bodies have prioritized it to be included within universal health coverage. So it's also it has been included as one of the priority NCDs. So previously we had 4 NCDs, non-communicable disorders, that were prioritized. But last year mental health was also included as the 5th NCD to be prioritized. So as a result of all this, we believe that we're going to be paying much more attention to trying to address mental health issues in Africa.
You mentioned the issue of prioritizing mental health, which is a process that is going on right now, but surely stigma is also a major issue, especially across Africa, in how it is reported and handled on the continent.
Yes, definitely. Stigma is another big issue that impacts on not just policy making and how they prioritize mental health at the decision-making level, the government level, but also at the household level when they decide who is going to go to school, who is going to be taken for healthcare, where they're going to invest their money when they're investing in the children. If somebody has a mental disorder, obviously, due to stigma, they may not be addressed. And stigma also impacts on how we prioritize conditions in our governments.
Dr. Florence Baingana from the WHO speaking to us from Congo, Brazzaville. Thank you very much for your time. And one of the messages of World Mental Health Day is that if you're suffering from mental health issues, you're encouraged to seek assistance from a doctor or a local organization that can help you. And there's more information on the BBC website. Well, in the French city of Lyon today, international donors have pledged just short of $14 billion to tackle HIV/AIDS, malaria and tuberculosis. The French President, Emmanuel Macron, announced the new funds on the second and final day of a donor conference. A dozen heads of state and governments, mostly from African countries, alongside CEOs like Microsoft's co-founder Bill Gates, are attending. Well, our health correspondent, Rhoda Odhiambo, has been monitoring the goings-on at the meeting and joins us now from Nairobi. Rhoda, the amount of $14 billion is huge, but how much of it is already in the pot?
So the amount that was being raised in France is quite huge, but most developing countries, especially those in Africa that rely mostly on donor funding in tackling HIV, TB and malaria, they're using the funds that was raised in 2016 during the Global Fund meeting. So most of the funding that is being used by these African countries is from that funding, and the funding is expected to come to an end this year. So by next year, they will be applying for this, and then they'll get the grant for the next 3 years, which is the amount that was raised in the Lyon conference in France, and it will be used in reducing new incidences and deaths of TB, HIV, and malaria in respective African countries.
And how much of an impact can $14 billion make over 3 years?
It can make a very big impact because we've seen over the last few years that the Global Fund has been around, and the money that these more than all the African countries have received from the Global Fund and other partners in tackling HIV, TB and malaria, the impact has actually been felt in all these countries. We've seen that HIV rates and deaths have reduced, malaria incidences and deaths have also reduced, and also co-infection rates have reduced. So what these countries are hoping to see is that when they get this new funding, they'll be looking at how best they're going to reduce the incidences of all these new infections, and this will be tailor-made by the framework or the policies that they're going to use to see how the funds will be distributed and how the funds will be used.
Rhoda, one thing I didn't quite understand is the fact that African countries are also contributing various amounts into this one pot. I mean, wouldn't it have been better for them to have kept the money and used it on themselves?
Many have argued that, but we also have to remember that many African countries most of their funding that they're relying on to support these 3 programs are from international donors. So from the Global Fund, one has to contribute a certain amount, and many African countries every year they've been increasing the amount that they've been putting in, and they've been getting a lot of funding from the Global Fund to implement certain projects. So from the money that they have received and the money that they've received from local partners locally, internationally, and those ones that are funded by the government, the money that they are using is to help in preventing these diseases. So you'll find that if you're tackling a disease like HIV, for instance, every country has to look at where the HIV is concentrated mostly. Is it among key populations? Are you targeting key populations? And these are prisoners, sex workers, men who have sex with men, or are you targeting young people? Or are you targeting also children, seeing that you don't want any new children to be born with HIV? Okay,
Rhoda Odhiambo there from our Nairobi studio. Thank you very much. Now, the United States has sanctioned members of the Indian-born Gupta family for operating what it calls a significant corruption network in South Africa. A Treasury Department statement accuses 3 Gupta brothers of using political connections to engage in bribery, capturing government contracts, and misappropriating state assets. The Gupta family was closely linked to the former South African President Jacob Zuma and has previously denied any wrongdoing. South African businessman Salim Essa is also accused by the U.S. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. Hundreds of refugees have been pictured camping outside the office of the UN Refugee Agency in Cape Town in South Africa, saying they do not feel safe. The refugees from Rwanda, Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Bangladesh are blaming high levels of crime as well as xenophobia for their unease. Tens of thousands of civilians are reported to have fled the major Turkish offensive against Kurdish fighters in northeastern Syria. They say Turks have killed more than 100 militants since the assault began on Wednesday. There have been waves of air and military attacks. Turkey's President Erdogan has defended his country's actions, which have been condemned by the Europeans and others. Riot police have shut a popular radio station critical of Liberia's president and former football star George Weah. The founder of Roots FM claims the station had complied with all broadcast regulations, but Liberia's justice minister says he'd received a letter from the Liberia Telecommunications Authority complaining that the station and 2 others were operating without a license. Now, the release from prison of Tunisian presidential candidate Nabil Karoui has come as a surprise to many in the country. Karoui walked free from jail on Wednesday to a hero's welcome, just days ahead of a presidential runoff against a political newcomer, conservative law professor Kais Saied. It's the latest twist in a shock election dominated by political outsiders in the country, whose 2011 revolution sparked a wave of regional uprisings. Despite being behind bars, he won 15.6% of the votes in the first round of the presidential poll. Well, with me now is Rana Taha from BBC Monitoring. I mean, this is a head-scratching one for me. Why was he released?
No one can tell for sure, of course, but there are some theories. The fact of the matter is that him being in prison actually seems to have worked in his favor. It was such a surprise that he made it to the second round of the presidential election, and even in the legislative elections of the country, which were earlier this week, his party came out second, which is huge for a party that has only been formed earlier this week. But also there were so many concerns about how fair and free the elections were, with one of the top candidates in jail. So this might have been a move to make the elections, to remove any suspicion on the elections not being fair.
And those runoff elections that you mentioned there are this Sunday. Does this make Mr. Karoui, his release from prison, does it make him the favorite now to win that runoff?
Well, given how surprising the elections have been, it's really hard to tell, but it's not unlikely, not at all. But then again, you have to remember that his competitor was endorsed by the Islamist Ennahda party, which has managed to win the largest number of seats in the legislative elections. So that also could play a part in next week's.
And you mentioned those legislative elections, I mean parliamentary elections. You know, the other party actually won a majority, but they do not have a clear majority to form a government.
No.
So what's going to happen now in Parliament?
Well, they have to form coalitions. And the problem is that both Ennahda and Karoui's Qalb Tunis party, they've both sort of expressed that they're not really ready to form a coalition with each other. And they have the biggest number of seats. So it looks like
it's all up in the air.
Exactly.
Rana Taha, I'm sure we're going to have you back on the program talking more about this. Thank you very much. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwache. Still to come, we've got Mimi with the sports, and we catch up with a group of young Senegalese breakdancers with their eyes set on the 2024 Olympics. I'm Peter Okwache. The top story this hour. It's World Mental Health Day with emphasis this year on preventing suicide and asking for help if you're at risk. And let's stay with our top story and a look at another issue surrounding mental health. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is a condition that can emerge following a traumatic experience and can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and other mental health disorders. One Somali-Danish psychiatric doctor based in Copenhagen saw a number of Somalis suffering from the disorder and decided to do something about it.
What made me do this work is when I saw the dire need for mental health care expertise and facilities due to trauma from the war that my country suffered. I'm just volunteering my time, really. My name is Dr. Faduma Ali Jumale. I studied in Moscow, Russia, but then I relocated to Denmark where I specialized in mental health.
Dr. Ahmed wiilkan 7 sano ka hor ayaa waxa ku dhacday brain infection. Haddana waxaan la shaqeeyaa.
Now I work with Dr. Ahmed Shira in Beledweyne in central Somalia. I help him with mental health patients.
oo dadka dhimirka ka xanuunsana kula kulanto Skype-ka.
I speak to them through Skype so that I may be able to diagnose and treat them. There are many young doctors in our country who studied hard, but they lack experience and guidance. So, the smallest thing we can do for our country, while we are still living abroad, is to give a young doctor in Somalia a small portion of our time to share our knowledge and provide them with guidance and mentorship, which they need. This can really help our country a lot, and it doesn't take much of our time either. I can help train doctors or even attend to patients while in the comfort of my own home. So this is my responsibility, and it doesn't take much. When I think about the future, I feel all doctors, including me, of course, need to empower our people with knowledge and leave a legacy of helping bridge the great chasm for mental health care while we are still in the diaspora, so that we can at least leave something substantial for our people.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports. Mimi is here.
Thank you, Peter. Now, Uganda Football Association President Moses Magogo has been suspended for his role in the resale of World Cup tickets. BBC Sport Africa's Piers Edwards with more on the story.
Moses Magogo is facing an uncertain future as president of the Ugandan Football Association after being banned from all football at any level for the next 2 months. This not only applies to the Ugandan game, of which Mr. Magogo took charge in 2013, but also African football's ruling body, the Confederation of African Football, of which Mr. Magogo is an executive committee member. Now, intriguingly, Mr. Magogo was allowed to contest CAF elections in July, even though he was under investigation by football's world governing body at the time. In a statement, FIFA said it opened investigations into Mr. Magogo last year about the resale of 2014 World Cup tickets. FIFA also added that it had entered into a plea bargain with Mr. Magogo, and as part of his reduced sanction, he has been also fined $10,000.
It's the international break, so there are African friendlies to look out for today. The big one took place with 5 times world champions Brazil drawing 1-1 with Senegal. That fixture took place in Singapore. Elsewhere, Thailand also drew 1-1 with Congo-Brazzaville. The other result was Burkina Faso, who are currently playing against Gabon. And in an hour's time, the kickoff with this summer's Africa Cup of Nations winners, Algeria, who take on DR Congo. Next, many athletics fans are gearing up this Saturday to see this man, Eliud Kipchoge, attempt for a second time to try and run a marathon in less than 2 hours. He was 26 seconds shy 2 years ago, and ahead of this weekend's race, which is taking place in the Austrian capital, the world marathon record holder admitted at his press conference that conditions have to be perfect over the weekend, and he's feeling the heat.
There is a pressure from around the world, but I will do my best, and come Saturday, I will be on the road and everything will be fine. I need the energy. One needs the mental strength to perform well. In this kind of race, you also have to train hard to get to this level, so you have to be well prepared both physically and mentally.
And finally, a group of young Senegalese are making a name for themselves in the world of breakdancing, winning Best Video at the 2018 Battle of the Year in France. They have big dreams for the future of their group and are breaking, especially with the possibility of breakdancing featuring in the 2024 Olympics.
Dancing comes from the heart. My name is Xavier, I'm 26 years old and I'm a dance teacher. I'm in the group Power Crew Senegal. We come here to the beach. It's good to practice on the beach. Sand makes breakdancing very difficult. But think about it. You work here, and then when you go back indoors, you are much faster.
I believe there is a real potential in Dakar. I think the b-boys who train and practice this discipline belong to the Olympics. We don't know if the b-boying will be part of the Olympics. We will find out in December 2020, and I really hope that b-boying will be included.
Watching breakdance is really something important to us. It's not just a sport or a type of dance. It's something like a family, full of love. And it's really very important to us. If it ever gets to the Olympics, we would then be able to share it with the world, with a lot of joy and love.
No breakdancing for me, Peter, but that's all the sport.
Stuff. Many thanks, Mimi. Thank you very much. Now, for the first time in over a century, the public will be allowed to visit the Unity Park in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. The park lies in the grounds of the Grand Palace, built under Emperor Menelik 130 years ago. Our reporter Haptamu Tibebu was there and joins us now. Haptamu, describe what today was like to us, please.
Thank you very much, Peter. Today, Ethiopia inaugurated the Grand Unity Park, which has historical, natural, and also cultural attractions. Among the historical attractions is historical palaces, which are as old as 130 years, and there are also pavilions which represent different regions of the country, and a traditional garden with native plants.
And why was it closed to the public for this long, and why is the government opening it now?
This park has not been open to public before, and it's actually an unfamiliar move by the Ethiopian government, and is seen as part of the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's reformist agenda or reformist move. And as you know, in the past years, the country's economy has been affected by unrest, and now the government wants to propel the economy of the country, and the tourism is one of those sectors on which the government is going to focus.
And just very briefly, if you would, is there a lot of interest from Ethiopians to go and see what it looks like? I mean, it does look amazing. I've seen pictures of it.
Yes, it looks amazing, and especially that place. It was very difficult for a normal person or for a regular person to enter that palace or to approach even the fences of that palace. And the opening of this park is seen as a really joyful moment, and many Ethiopians are eager to visit in the next days.
Indeed, Haptamu Tibebu, thank you very much for speaking to us there live from Ethiopia. And that's it from Focus on Africa for today. I am Peter Okwoche saying thanks a lot for watching. See you very soon. Goodbye.